So some of the new images for Rings of Power have already created a bit of a controversy in that they appear to be showing female orcs, and certain fans are already hollering that this really breaks the canon because there are no female orcs. But no, they are there, and Tolkien tells us they are there. In fact, the story demands that there be female orcs. But that just brings up the question, well, what exactly are the orcs at all? And that's an extremely important question. And I don't think we entirely know the answer, so this video cannot definitively answer that question, but hopefully we'll get started. So let's go with, I think, the consensus answer, which people trace back to the Silmarillion. Now, whether the Silmarillion itself should be considered canonical is, to put it mildly, vague. But in the Silmarillion, we read that Morgoth apparently created the orcs by taking elves and corrupting them. So the answer would be orcs are corrupt elves. But that can't be correct. And also, that's not really what the passage says. It says, allegedly Morgoth did this. We really don't know if he did do this. And that runs counter to the entire mythology, where Tolkien is pretty definitive on this, that, quote, evil cannot create. In other words, if you're an agent of evil, you're forbidden from creating life. You can corrupt life, but you really can't create it. And Morgoth just taking elves and corrupting them and essentially creating a new species would contradict the entire mythology. So that can't be right. And people have this image that orcs are just magical creatures. It is true that there is a lot of magic in Lord of the Rings and the wider mythology, but Tolkien was always uncomfortable thinking of these creatures as wholly magical. He tried to restrict magic in various ways. Whether he succeeded or not, we'll put aside. But that's probably not the right way to think of it either. So orcs don't just pop into existence. They do breed. And even that passage in the Silmarillion affirms, yes, they do breed. So they do seem to have normal sex organs, for lack of a better word. You have male orcs, they would by definition have to breed with female orcs. We may not see these female orcs, but a letter recently uncovered confirms that yes, despite what the books say or imply, there are not just male orcs. So it can't be, quote, the evil agent, whether Morgoth and or Sauron, just took elves and made them into orcs. That's not what happened. Nor can they just multiply orcs out of nothing. They have to breed orcs through normal breeding procedures, which means sex. So the way we have orcs in The Lord of the Rings, it's perhaps disgusting, but presumably they mated with human women and or female orcs. That's how we answer the question. But what are the origins of the orcs onto themselves? That still seems a little murky, because when we read The Hobbit, it seems the orcs are just goblins. But the goblins are created from slime. So that contradicts what we read in the Silmarillion. What is occurring? And I want to be careful here, because I have not read the source, so I want to invoke it carefully. But apparently in Morgoth's Ring, Tolkien finally settled on kind of an answer. But again, Tolkien wasn't alive to carefully edit these books, so this is the Tolkien estate. It's what the Tolkien estate considers canonical. And we do have Christopher Tolkien affirming this, but again, this isn't really Tolkien, so we have to be careful. This isn't really the author. But there it seems settled on that the orcs originally were just corrupted men. And that's how we have orcs. Orcs are not really elves, they're men. They began as men, they were corrupted, and that's how the original generation of orcs were created. So elves could have been, quote, grafted onto them later to create a kind of mutant species, but the species itself is technically human in origin. But again, I have not read that source, so I can't confirm that. This is all secondhand research, but that apparently would be the answer, that humans who were corrupted are basically the origin of orcs. But if we read, quote, the normal canon with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and even the Silmarillion, we really don't know, or we're getting contradictory answers. So in terms of settling the answer definitively and harmonizing it with the canon, the best I can do would probably be this, that orcs began as corrupted men, and the typical orc probably has both human and elf blood, and are just a corrupted individual, and over time they just became more and more mutated. So when we see them by the time of Lord of the Rings, the average orc is essentially a mixture of human blood, elf blood, and orc blood. And depending on how much quote orc is in them, when they breed with a human woman and or female orc, they will be more orc or less orc depending on where they are, depending if they serve Saruman and Sauron. They may speak different languages, they have different dispositions, they have different strengths, different weaknesses, and there is some generic continuity that orcs don't like sunlight. Orcs have certain features like thin legs, thin arms, and they have a kind of grotesque appearance, and so on and so forth. So there is a kind of structure to the orcs, but the ultimate origin of the orc, or what the orc is in essence, is still really not clear. But I would harmonize it by saying they probably began as corrupted humans, and presumably Melkor then bred future orcs. Again, it's not a very coherent answer, but that would be apparently what the canon is telling us. So, what are orcs? Still unclear, but the best answer would be they began as corrupted human beings and then later mutated or bred with others, and that's how we have the orcs as we see them currently.